The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was one of the most influential horror movies ever made. It changed the landscape of the genre forever. But it was also made in just 14 days for less than $30,000. So how did Tobe Hooper pull off such an impressive feat? To answer that question, we have to travel back to the early 70s and get this story started at its very beginning. The year is 1970, and Tobe Hooper has just moved to Texas from his native North Carolina. Now Tobe had already directed several short films and a couple of feature-length documentaries, but he wanted to make a name for himself in the world of fiction filmmaking. He just didn't know what kind of movie he should make. And that's when everything changed. One day Tobe was driving down the road when he saw a billboard advertising the local chainsaw repair shop. It got him thinking, maybe he could make a horror film about a killer who uses a chainsaw as his weapon of choice. Now, obviously, that's not a unique idea. There had already been plenty of slashers with iconic weapons by that point, like the classic Psycho, which came out only a few years earlier. But Tobe wasn't trying to copy those films. He was trying to make something even more terrifying. You see, Tobe wanted to make a movie that was grounded in reality. Instead of a supernatural killer, he decided to go with a homicidal maniac. And instead of focusing on the violence, he would build suspense and dread, relying on psychological horror instead of jump scares. This approach allowed him to make the film for next to nothing while still delivering scares that were genuinely unsettling. But Tobe knew that if he wanted to get funding for his project, he needed a more marketable title and a logline that could entice investors. That's why he took inspiration from Ed Gein, a real-life serial killer from Wisconsin who had a taste for human skin. In fact, Gein became known as the inspiration for Buffalo Bill, the main antagonist from The Silence of the Lambs, and it was Gein's hobby of making furniture out of human skin that inspired Tobe to come up with a new title for his film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. With a title and a logline in place, Tobe was able to secure a small budget for his movie and assembled a crew and cast to start filming. But when it came time to shoot, there was one problem. His star, Marilyn Burns, who played Sally Hardesty, wasn't feeling well. She had come down with a bad case of food poisoning and spent most of her time on set, either in the bathroom or lying in her trailer. Now, anyone else in her position would have asked for a rain check and postponed filming until they were healthy. But Marilyn didn't have that luxury. You see, she was getting paid a flat rate for the entire film, and if she didn't show up to work every day, she wouldn't get paid anything at all. So she pushed through the pain and the discomfort and delivered a performance that would become iconic in the horror genre. But she wasn't the only one working under difficult circumstances. The entire cast and crew were working long hours for very little pay. Many of them didn't even get a full night's sleep before filming began, because they spent the night before shooting driving to the set, and they often had to wait around for hours while the director set up his shots. And sometimes they had to improvise their lines, because the script hadn't been finished yet. In fact, the dialogue in the entire movie consists of only 3 pages of actual scripted lines. The rest of it is completely improvised, which is one reason why the film feels so authentic and realistic. But the low budget and long hours weren't the only obstacles Tobe had to overcome during production. He kept getting notes from his producer who thought the film was too violent and disturbing. For example, he told Tobe that the scene where Leatherface chased Kirk and accidentally cut off his own sister's head had to be toned down, because it was just too gruesome. But Tobe refused to back down, and he kept the shot in the movie. And it was this level of commitment to his vision that made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre such a success. When it finally premiered in 1974, audiences were shocked and horrified by what they saw on screen. They had never seen anything like this before. It was raw, it was violent, and it was terrifyingly realistic. But despite its graphic content, the film was also a critical success. Roger Ebert praised Tobe Hooper's direction, calling it masterful and saying that the film was one of the most original and effective horror films ever made. and while it may not have been the highest-grossing film of all time, it did manage to earn over $30 million worldwide, on a budget of only $80,000, making it one of the most profitable independent films ever made. And it didn't take long for Hollywood to come knocking on Tobe's door, offering him big-budget studio films. But Tobe turned them all down. He was happy with his low-budget grindhouse-style movies, and didn't want to compromise his creative freedom for a bigger paycheck. In fact, he went on to direct several more cult classics like Eaten Alive, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, Poltergeist, and Invaders from Mars. But sadly, none of them were ever as successful as his first film. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that. For starters, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a product of its time. It captured the anxieties and fears of the 70s, and put them on screen in a way that was both terrifying and thought-provoking. It was also helped along by some incredible practical effects, especially considering the low budget. Gunnar Hansen, who played Leatherface, actually cut off his own hair for the role, which added to the realism of the character. And the chainsaw used in the film is the same one that Gunnar used in real life. He bought it from a pawn shop in Texas for $300, and it was so realistic that it scared the wits out of many of the film's crew members. But perhaps the biggest reason for the film's success was its marketing. When it was first released, it was advertised as based on the true story of Ed Gein, which is not true at all. But that didn't stop audiences from believing it. In fact, it only added to the film's notoriety and made it seem even more terrifying than it already was. But despite its success, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre has been banned or cut in several countries due to its graphic violence. In fact, when it was first released in the UK, it was banned outright and didn't receive a theatrical release until 1990. As for Tobe Hooper, he went on to direct several other films, but none of them were ever as successful as his first one. He passed away in 2017 at the age of 74, but his legacy lives on in the form of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a film that changed the landscape of the horror genre forever. It paved the way for other low-budget slashers, like Halloween and Friday the 13th, and it inspired countless filmmakers to pick up a camera and make their own horror movies. But most of all, it's a film that will make you never look at a chainsaw the same way again. So I want to ask you, what's your favorite scene from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more videos about the origins of iconic horror movies, stay tuned for more updates. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.